Hello everyone, today's video is dedicated to the ruin Thurisaz from the Elder Futhark, and this is a primordial force of destruction and basically creation through the destruction of what was. It's a directed will though, a will that must be a destructive will that must be directed and does not have a consciousness of its own. So I dedicate this video to that rune, and let's get started. Now, what I want to talk about here is basically ancient cultures and their idea of race, of different peoples. Now, ancient cultures had different ideas about race and different peoples, but they did not define peoples based on race. They did not view their races as superior. These ancient cultures, anyway, as far as my research is concerned, they did not view different peoples as different peoples that were different races as being intrinsically different, lesser or higher. Now, when we go to the Northern European, let's say around the Viking era, they based peoples on geographical ideas and their gods. But as far as skin color, hair color, things like that go, they did not differentiate people. Now, if we go to the Egyptians, they had idea of peoples worshiping different gods, and that's how they kind of divided people. And we only know the Egyptians in the decline of their civilization. The Egyptians had reached a golden age much prior to most of the evidence we have about them, and the decline of their civilization was one marked by many demigods. In fact, we'll add that there. And previously in the Golden Age, these demigods were less prevalent, and there was main gods, if not one god. And then, of course, the cult of Ra came later and got rid of a lot of the demigods. But that's how they differentiated people. It's based on gods, not about skin color or hair color or eye color or anything like that. The Greeks, they virtually had no differentiation system. They did not view themselves as different from Africans or Egyptians. They just viewed them as being from other places. But they were much more open than even the cultures on this list in ancient times. Go ahead and put open here. In that they were accepting of trade with everyone, and they were accepting with fighting anyone who was against them. And this similar to the Vikings. And they enslaved, just like the Vikings and Egyptians, they enslaved people not based on race, but just on who they captured and what city they burnt, things like that. And that doesn't make these cultures perfect. But race is more of a nationalistic idea, as I'll explain a little bit more in a couple minutes. But the Hindu culture, and it's more of a culture than a religion. I'm Hindu. It's a culture of spirituality, of sharing ideas, and kind of openness to other people's understanding of reality. So I think Hindu is more of a culture than a spirituality. And basically, there was little division in Hindu. There is little division as well now in Hindu culture. Division was more based on ability. A lot of people think that the caste system is ancient, but it's actually not. It's fairly new, based on skin color. And division was based on what you were good at as a person. And you should pursue what you were good at. And that would basically determine your place in society, what you were good at, and you going after and pursuing that career. And you know that would form the priest and the warrior class and the merchant class and the servant class, things like that. But it became more racial as far as skin color later on. This is not an ancient concept for Hinduism. The Bhagavad Gita points to different classes of people being what you're good at, what you can do as a human being, and not what you were born into. This is my understanding of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, all these different ancient cultures. The reason they didn't have an idea of race or different peoples, different, not just genetics, but people being higher or lower than themselves just because they're from a different land. Even if they had ideas of that within their own society, just because their ideas of other people from being different land, being higher or lower. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is that they weren't exposed to as many other people, and they just viewed them as kind of strangers they didn't really understand. And another is that they viewed gods and their creation myths or creation realities, depending on how you look at it, as basically defining them as a people, not their physical appearance. That came later on when nations started basically viewing themselves as superior. And when nations view themselves as superior, whoever the vast majority of the people are, what they look like, what language they speak, that becomes part of the national identity. Whereas in many ancient tribes that existed as well, but in ancient cultures when civilization started to form, that was more foreign. The idea of just being different because you look different. That was foreign to when solid civilizations were starting to cement themselves as being civilizations, having an identity based on that. But when we started having national identity, we reverted to tribalism far more. When we started developing nation states in the style of the Greeks, ironically, because they were probably the least racist, I guess you could say. When we started developing nation states like that in their form, based on their city states, we started to classify the majority of our own people because the majority usually had the biggest hand in political life, political decisions, and basically the government. We started to classify who would we allow in and how we would separate those within the nation. And these people that would make this decision were the majority that were in the government. The majority race would always have a bigger percentage in the government and decide how different people were dealt with within a nation. So national identity reverted back to tribalism more so than the beginning of civilizations, I guess you could say. Now, this is more of my own idea than something I've taken from other people, but I hope this has been interesting. And if you have any comments, shoot them down there.